Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We are seeing fields of green around the state, which is always a good sign this time of year for Oklahoma wheat producers. We're joined now by David Marburger, our Extension Small Grain Specialist. And David, it sounds like planting time is starting to wind down across the state.
Yep, you bet. As we're getting into the end of October here, we are starting to get on the back end of our planting season here. A little bit behind from where we are in terms of being average in terms of the number of acres that have been planted, but nonetheless, the past couple weeks here we've had a little bit of a pretty good window to try and get a lot of wheat stuck in. So while we may be behind a little bit from what we were seeing from the USDA numbers in terms of our acres planted compared to the average, we are kind of making up for that. So again, we are kind of getting on the back end here and getting some of that last winter wheat in the ground.
In terms of conditions for planting these last few weeks, they've been pretty favorable?
Yeah, for the most part, working around some of the rains that we've had in October here, and in some ways it's been a little bit of a struggle almost the whole planting season here. We had good conditions going into for our producers who are planting really early to try and target that fall forage, and then it dried up quite a bit. And we also had a lot of fall armyworm in the area, so producers kind of wanted to wait on that till that maybe left, or we had some rainfalls bring some soil moisture back for us. And then we did have those rains kind of return, which brought the good soil moisture, but we kept getting some of those rains kind of spread throughout September into October here. So good soil moisture, but we had to kind of pick and choose times to get out into the field when we could and get that wheat put in the ground.
As the wheat is emerging around the fields, is there any disease concern that you're seeing or thinking about?
Every year we might see some of those common leaf spotting diseases in some of our fields, especially our no-till fields where we have that residue from the previous crop. But often we don't typically recommend worrying about controlling those diseases in the fall here with a fungicide application. It's good to note if you are seeing it, which fields are you seeing it in, where at in those fields, so that when we come out of the winter time, we're out there and now we can be out scouting. We know where those spots were, where we have a source of inoculum for these different diseases, and then watching the weather. And if it looks like conditions are favorable for disease development and we start seeing that disease increase, then we can go out and think about putting out a fungicide application to control those.
And for those producers who have dual purpose fields, they'll be thinking about getting the cattle out there.
Typically it's about 45 to 60 days after planting from when we can turn those cattle out on the wheat pasture. We want to look for a couple different things. We want to look for above ground growth. We'd like to see about 6 to 8 inches of top growth. But don't always let that top growth fool you with what's going on below the ground. We want to have good root system available as well. We need that secondary root system, or those crown roots, to begin developing before we turn the cattle out there. Otherwise they'll rip those plants up. So again, looking for 6 to 8 inches of top growth, as well as those crown roots beginning to develop, which is our primary source of water and nutrient uptake and helps anchor those plants in the ground so the cattle won't remove them while they're out there grazing.
Okay, great advice as always, and David, we'll check back in with you in a few weeks, of course.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
Rain, the perfect Halloween treat for farmers and ranchers. The rain from last weekend provided a good dose of moisture for farmers and ranchers in central and eastern Oklahoma. Green map areas received over an inch of rain. Many Mesonet sites recorded over 1.5 inches of rain. The highest Mesonet site was Medicine Park with 2 91/100 inches of rain. Last weekend's rain missed the Panhandle, northwestern, and southwestern Oklahoma areas. Those were the same areas with humidities in the teens on Wednesday afternoon, but humidities were low across the entire state at 3:40 p.m. The highest relative humidity was 30% at Red Rock and Perkins. The lowest humidity was 13% at Hooker and Buffalo. The low western Oklahoma humidities were driven by higher air temperatures, 80s in western areas, 70s in central and eastern Oklahoma. Those warmer temperatures and lower humidities helped increase the fire risk at 3 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, with orange moderate fire danger areas widespread across the Panhandle and western Oklahoma. Fire danger hasn't been a big concern with green growing foliage, but once freezes turn green foliage to dead foliage, the risk of fires starting and spreading when humidities are low will jump. Here's Gary with a drought update and a look ahead.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to give you a spooky, scary winter outlook. Okay, it won't be that bad, especially after what we've seen over the last 6 or 7 years, but it is interesting. As you can see, most of the drought, that moderate drought in the light brown, is eradicated from Oklahoma, just a little bit left in far southeastern Oklahoma and also far northwestern Oklahoma. Other than that, just some abnormally dry conditions, those areas colored in yellow. But again, those areas will still have to be looked at as the rain did help, but we need more in those areas. Now for the winter outlook. The interesting news is we do have up to about a 70% chance of La Nina occurring. Now this cooling of the oceanic waters off the west coast of South America and the associated atmospheric pattern changes do tend to bring Oklahoma a little bit warmer and a little bit drier than normal weather during the cool season, especially December through February. So as we look at the winter outlook, keep in mind this classic La Nina pattern. So the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for winter, this is again for the December through February period, for precipitation calls for increased odds of below normal precipitation across the southern parts of the state, maybe out in west Oklahoma a little bit more as well. Now in the northern half of the state, not really much of an indication in that area. So as we go through the fall, we're going to have to keep an eye on the La Nina development, see if that does indeed bring us warmer and drier than normal weather as we get into the winter, because that can enhance fire danger. So something to watch for. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We are talking weeds now with our extension weed specialist, Misha Manucheri. And Misha, those winter annuals are starting to pop up around Oklahoma. What are you seeing?
They are. We're starting to kind of cool down, moving into some freezing temperatures this weekend. We're starting to see our summer annuals senesce and finish their life cycles, and our winter annuals are emerging. Seeing lots of bromus species, Italian ryegrass, broadleafs, our mustards are coming out, henbit.
Some of those are a little bit hard to identify because they're grassy weeds.
They are. They're tough, especially the grasses when they're at that seedling stage. We were crawling around in the field trying to ID plants yesterday, and sometimes we need to bring them in and look under a microscope. But we can get there, so it just takes a little bit of effort.
In terms of management options, what kind of things can producers do at this stage?
So if your wheat's already in the ground and you're past that spiking stage, probably too late for a pre-emergence herbicide, something that's going to control weeds that haven't emerged yet. We can be looking at those early post-emergence products. On the broadleaf side, we have several growth regulators that are labeled in our small grains, and then we have some grassy weed control. So looking at products to spray for what's up, and then maybe also prevent what could be coming.
We're here in your research plots. Give us an idea of what you're getting organized for in about a week.
Yeah, so next Friday, we'll have the herbicide symptomology clinic down here in the Cow Creek bottom. What we do is we spray a bunch of different pre-emergence and post-emergence herbicides over canola, wheat, and this year we have winter pea. And we find out how they affect those crops. We look at what's labeled, what can we not spray, what weeds will they kill. Kind of gives us a chance to find out what's available and how to best use those products.
And you have a whole lineup of speakers throughout the morning.
We do. So helping me on the symptomology side, will be Josh Lofton, our cropping system specialist, and of course David Marburger, our small grain specialist. We also have Todd Bauman on the program, who's going to give us an update on our oxen tolerant crops. And then John Long will discuss proper spray equipment, tank clean out, kind of best practices for spraying.
And that's Friday, November 3rd at the Agronomy Station in Stillwater.
Yep.
Terrific. Thanks a lot, Misha, for your time today. And to RSVP for the Symptomology Clinic, we have a link for you at sunup.okstate.edu.
Here we are almost in November, and Daryl, wheat's in the ground, it's starting to come up, but is it pasture ready yet?
It isn't in most cases. The wheat's running a little bit later than we expected on planting, emergence. It's getting there.
Right.
But you know, for all the promise we saw in September, the wheat didn't happen quite that way. Some areas were actually dry through September. They waited to plant. Other cases, there was actually too much moisture. The biggest threat overall has been the armyworm threat. And so producers have held off. Some early planted wheat did get hit and they had to replant. Others have waited, hoping for some colder weather here. So it's coming, but it's not quite ready yet.
Now let's move on to feeder cattle. How are things looking in the market?
You know, this market this fall has been really surprisingly strong for feeder cattle, and that's kind of the way it's been all year. 2017 has been a pleasant surprise for the most part. Certainly this fall, the calf prices have held up well. We've seen less than half of the normal seasonal decline from August through September, now into October. The bigger feeder cattle have actually gone up counter-seasonally during this time. So again, prices have held very well. We may still yet see some seasonal pressure, but it looks like it's going to be fairly minimal at this point.
Is there money to be made in the cow, calf, and stalker markets?
There really is, I think, opportunities. Again, markets are certainly higher than they were this time last year. Cow-calf producers, for the most part, I think have some opportunity for margins. It does obviously depend on the cost side. For those producers that are managing these costs pretty well, I think there's some decent margin there and opportunities going forward. On the stalker side, again, despite the fact that the purchase price, these calf prices have stayed fairly high this fall, we've had very strong futures markets for the spring, so you could actually look at a decent margin for these calves and actually lock in something to reduce some of the risks. So there's opportunities there. Feedlot demand has been exceptionally good for these heavyweight feeder cattle, and that really gives the stalker producer an incentive to add some weight to these cattle to get them to the weight that the feedlots really want them, and that's reflected in the market prices we see today.
And the OQBN sales started this past week. Let's kind of talk about some of the cattle going through there.
Well, you know, we're expecting decent runs of calves this fall in the OQBN sale. It's an opportunity for producers to add value to these calves and to market them in a place where they're most likely to capture that value. And so, we're anticipating a good sales season for the OQBN program.
Okay, thank you much. Daryl Pill, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
We're at the end of October, getting close to the 1st of November, and of course that means that we've reached the average first frost dates for many parts of Oklahoma. Those first light frosts that we get at this time of the year can be potentially dangerous if our cattle are grazing some of the sorghum type plants. Any of the forage sorghums, even a milo stubble field that we might have turned some cattle out on. And the potential danger comes from the accumulation of what we call prussic acid. This is particularly a concern of grazing cattle when we have these light frosts, because the frost causes some plant stress, and that stress then results in the accumulation of the prussic acid. When we have that frost, sometimes followed by some nice warm days, then we may get some regrowth coming up, suckering out from the lower parts of those plants, and that too is potentially dangerous for prussic acid. Prussic acid poisoning is a situation where the blood of the animal can take up oxygen as it passes by the lungs, but due to the presence of that particular compound, The blood cannot dispense the oxygen into the tissues, and therefore the animal will act, first of all, like they're being asphyxiated or they can't get their breath, and quite frankly, will probably go down and succumb to the prussic acid poisoning very, very quickly. I think the best way to go about preventing prussic acid poisoning at this time of the year is, first of all, stay off of these forage sorghum type fields, if at all possible, until after we've had a hard killing freeze. Then we have a much better chance of the prussic acid, which is in the gas, which is in the form of a gas inside the cell walls of the plant, those cell walls breaking down and allowing the gas to escape. Certainly, if we see any kind of indication of an animal showing these symptoms while they're grazing those kinds of fields, we need to get the rest of those cattle off of that as quickly as possible. We hope this helps you understand some of the management procedures that you need to keep in mind if you're going to graze cattle on any kind of sorghum field this fall during the time when we might have some of these frost events taking place. And I encourage you to go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu, and there we'll have, under show links, a link to a fact sheet that will tell you a lot more about prussic acid poisoning and the possibilities of that happening here in Oklahoma with livestock. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Now to the classroom for a lesson on what nitrogen means to plants. Here's Brian Arnell.
When I do extension talks, I'll a lot of times get into the management strategies of fertilizer and talk about applying ammonium and nitrification and leaching and all that stuff. And every now and then I get asked about, well, what the heck's ammonium? What's nitrate? So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to go over some of the basics of nitrogen, just some of the basic science within it. One, nitrogen is essential to plants because it's involved in DNA, it's a part of proteins, it's a part of amino acids. Without nitrogen, the plants could not survive. It's also one of our 3 macronutrients, which means it's taken up in the largest quantities of all of our plant essential nutrients. Our atmosphere is made up of nitrogen. In fact, there's 78% of our atmosphere is into diatomic nitrogen. Now, unfortunately, our plants can't use that nitrogen. Our plants use 2 primary forms of nitrogen, which are NH4 or ammonium, that's ammonium ending with an M, it's a plus, and nitrate, NO3, that's a negative. Now to get from here to here, we either need some rhizobia or we need some bacteria, we need something to convert this atmospheric nitrogen into a plant usable form as ammonium or nitrate, or us as humans create nitrogen via taking a lot of heat and a lot of pressure and basically squeezing this down and turn it into ammonium form. All of our fertilizer nitrogens come from atmospheric nitrogen. Now, the importance of these 2 in the plant is that the plant can take up both ammonium and nitrate. Ammonium is non-mobile in the soil. Now, it doesn't move in the soil because the soil has a net negative charge and ammonium has a positive charge and opposites attract. So the ammonium holds onto the soil surface. So you have it going this way and it holds and binds to the soil. Unfortunately, our nitrate, which is a form that is negative, is repelled from the soil and it wants to stay away. So it stays in our soil solution and can be lost to leaching and volatilization. Many of our nitrogen forms that we use on a regular basis are ammonium-based forms. The most popular form of nitrogen is anhydrous ammonia. Now that is NH3 as a gas. NH3 is applied in the soil. It takes hydrogen out of the soil system and turns into NH4. Now this happens in a matter of seconds. And so seconds after ammonia is applied, it's turned into ammonium and it's plant usable. Now over a period of time, if there's enough moisture and enough warmth and the right amount of bacteria and microbes in the soil, we have the water plus microbes gives us NO3. So we go from a form that holds to the soil to the form that can be leached in the soil. In Oklahoma, this takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And so that's the process that we call nitrification, the turning from ammonium to nitrate. Now, if you think about most of our forms of nitrogen that we apply to agriculture soils, it's ammonium-based. That's anhydrous ammonia, NH3. Diammonium phosphate, that's DAP, 18460. Monoammonium phosphate, that's MAP, 1152O. And urea. Now, urea doesn't come in as an ammonium or ammonia, but it's actually in a form that is acted upon by an enzyme called urease, and it goes from urea plus urease gives you ammonia. So it's almost like adding ammonia gas. Now, those are the basics to nitrogen, which is one of our top 3 macronutrients. It's the one that we find the most deficient in the state of Oklahoma in our cereal crops, primarily due to its ability to be lost in the system. If you want to know more about nitrogen, feel free to log on and watch some of my lectures that I give in soil fertility class. Those links are available at sunup.okstate.edu.
The International Grains Council raised its estimates for global wheat and corn production, and Kim is here to talk about it. Kim, how do those estimates compare to the USDA?
Well, they're slightly below USDA's estimates. So you look at wheat, it came out at 27.5 billion bushels compared to USDA's 27.6. So very close, but slightly below that. You look at corn, 40.7 billion bushels compared to USDA's 40.9. I might note that 40.9 billion bushels of corn is the second highest on record, which was 42.3 billion bushels.
How did prices react?
There wasn't much reaction at all, and that's what you'd expect when the International Grain Council's numbers are still slightly below USDA's.
Well, both feed grain and wheat prices are in the tank. When can producers expect them to get out of the tank?
Well, if you're looking at wheat, and I just got back from a big Outlook conference in Kansas City, and I think everybody's in agreement that wheat prices are going to be in the tank for at least until we get into July or August of next year, and maybe into the 19 and 20 year. It's going to take some time for this glut of wheat to clear the market. If you look at corn, it's possible for it to react sooner. They're saying on the short run, corn prices, after we get through, say half through or more of the U.S. Harvest, we could get higher corn prices, just slightly higher. And corn can clear the market in 1 year, where it normally takes a couple years to clear a wheat glut. Corn around the world, it can clear the world in one marketing year. So we could see higher corn prices next fall.
A little bit of disappointing news, of course, with wheat. Why are they expected to remain below average?
Well, one, you can look at the U.S. We've got relatively high stocks, slightly lower than last year, but you look at the quality of those wheat stocks, we don't have protein, some of it we don't have test weight, so you've got a quality issue there. You've got the former Soviet Union that's got, they've increased their production by 50% in the last 2 years. It's good, their average protein was 12.4%, so we've got that competition with them and Ukraine. So it's going to take a while. It's going to possibly take a couple years to clear the world glut, to get production down, to get lower planted acres, to get lower harvested acres. It's just going to take more time than it does with corn.
And as a result, how should producers react to all of this?
Well, like they've been reacting. You look at planted acres of wheat in the United States last year, the lowest since the early 1900s. Word on the street right now, the U.S. winter wheat planted acres will probably be down another 5 to 10% this year. That's exactly what you'd expect to see with these low prices, and that's what we need to get prices up. One last thing on those prices, if the producers will give me 58 plus test weight and 11.5 or better protein, I'll almost guarantee them another 80 cents to $1 higher price next year.
Okay, Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. We're talking food safety today with Ravi Jadeja, who is a food safety specialist here at the Food and Ag Products Center. And Ravi, a question that you get all the time: should we wash raw chicken and other poultry before we cook it and eat it?
Thank you, Lyndall, for this opportunity. No, we should not wash, and let me show you that why we should not wash.
This is what you're not supposed to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Because when you wash it, you see that water is going everywhere. It's contaminating your countertop, as well as if you were to have any type of containers in your sink, those are contaminated as well. So now, though I'm going to wash my hand with soap, it's not necessarily will get rid of all of the microorganisms that are already present on the chicken. And now see, I'm using the rag. That's a very common practice. Now I'm going to contaminate this cloth as well. And that's how bacteria such as salmonella spread throughout your kitchen. And though this product is cooked, someone can touch this and then eat something that they were not supposed to eat, and they can get sick.
Now, what is the best way then to make sure that the chicken is clean or the bacteria is gone before you eat it?
So most of the time, if we buy a store-bought chicken, they already washed it, so that is really clean. But if we see something, we should not try to get rid of the chicken, blood or any type of material from the chicken at that time. We should just cook the chicken to the internal temperature of at least 165 Fahrenheit to kill any type of pathogens that might be present on the surface of chicken.
And the same goes for even putting a whole turkey or a whole chicken in the sink and washing it off before you bake it.
Yes.
Okay.
We definitely need to stay away from washing the whole poultry or whole chicken, because bigger the piece of chicken or poultry you are going to deal with, the more chances that you are going to splash that contaminated water all around the counter floor and your sink.
Some great food safety things to think about. Thanks a lot, Ravi.
Thank you.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.